Hello Internet, my name is the Golden Stalfos, and this is the third in our ongoing series of videos where we take a deep critical analysis of the inheritance cycle by Christopher Paolini. But before we do that, thanks for watching, Robert. Do you prefer Bobby? Or maybe Bob? It's always hard to know when it comes to Roberts. Or maybe just Rob. However you say it, you're doing great. Keep up the good work. Thanks for watching. And if your name isn't Robert, or some variation thereof, then subscribe and maybe I'll say your name next time. Alright, so today's video has to do with the languages of Allegasia. And this sort of leads into the world building as a whole. There are certain things that Paolini put a lot of thought into when it came to world building, like the map and the political structures and, all that kind of stuff. And there are some things that he did not put as much thought into. One of the main issues with the way Paolini uses languages is that he builds them based on what looks cool on the paper and not based on rules for constructing a language, which is a thing that has rules. Now, this isn't something I expect the average reader to pick up on, but I am terminally online and I have been watching linguistics YouTube for the past 6 years. So, yeah. Whenever I'm bored, I just play the entire playlist of Conlang Critic by Jan Misli, just at least 3 times a year. So I have at least a little bit of room to say that the way languages are constructed in the inheritance cycle is frustrating to me as a human being, even if it's not something that the average reader will notice. However, this applies just as much to the way Paolini uses English in the book as it does to the way he uses fictional languages. Obviously, there's no point in me talking about how incoherent the fictional languages are as a constructed language because they weren't built like that. They were built based on what looked good on paper. But the way he uses English is also incoherent, not in the sense that it's not understandable, but in the sense that it doesn't fit together very well. Everything is very understandable. It's just that he uses a weird mix of language. He uses modern English throughout most of the book. And when I say modern, I mean present day America, not the broader sense of modern English that stretches back 300 years. But a lot of times when characters are talking, he tries to use vaguely old-timey feeling language, right? He'll use phrases like a half dozen or 2 and 40 or I, and hope that gives it an old-timey feel. But it ends up coming across kind of like when you go to a Renaissance fair and they have a sign that's ye olde gift shop, because, yeah... he's consistent about using those kinds of phrases. He never has Aragon say yes when he could say I, right? But at the same time, Aragon's internal monologue and the narration in general is always just current day American English, and very flowery current day American English at that. So, stepping down to rural talk from the 1840s and pretending it's medieval talk just doesn't quite work. There's also certain words that get used because they have an appropriate meaning, but Paolini doesn't seem to understand that the etymology of that word means it can't exist in your world. There's a big temple where the priests of Helgrind worship, and it's got these arches and stained glass and everything. And he consistently refers to it as a cathedral because that evokes the correct imagery in your mind. But cathedrals are Catholic. That's why they have the same root word. Without Catholicism, there is no cathedral, right? And so in a world where Christianity doesn't exist because it's a fictional world with no, history of that, how does the word cathedral exist? And I know that's unbelievably petty and pedantic and meaningless, and no one cares, but it affects me. It also doesn't help that the English language is an absolute fustercluck of disconnected etymology. We contain a lot of words that are originally Latin or Greek or Norse or French or some mixture of the three because of history bullshit. Like, at one point in the second book, he's trying to get the idea across that Roran needs to, like, really step up and change people's minds in order to do stuff. And so he uses the word messianic because Roran has to be that level of convincing to people. Sure, cool, whatever. But that word obviously comes from the Hebrew word Messiah, which doesn't, like, how does that word exist in the English of this book if there's no, other language that humans speak? I know this is unbelievably petty and stupid, but it bugs the crap out of me whenever I notice it. And the thing is, I think Paolini is kind of aware of some of this. Like, I think he realizes that his language isn't, his constructed languages aren't, like, cohesively constructed because he goes out of his way to never use them, right? Like, he will always say, they were speaking in Dwarvish, or they said this in the ancient language, or whatever, but he will never put, like, a full sentence in the ancient language and then put a translation after, right? I think like once or twice he does that in the second book when they're doing like a poem, but beyond that, it doesn't happen. And for the most part, that doesn't matter, but like if you think of how this story might be adapted to television, in Game of Thrones, they have a world with multiple languages, and whenever characters are speaking another language, they're speaking it, and then we get subtitles in English, right? Could you do that with any of the languages from Alagasia? Are they constructed enough to do that? No. No, they're not. Not even close. And while that isn't really a problem for the average reader, because you don't need to know what the words are in the ancient language, you just need to know that that's what they're saying. The point comes across the same either way. It bugs me as a linguistics nerd because I'm weird. So again, this isn't like a real problem, but it's something that I noticed and it grated against me when I was re-listening to the series. When I read it as a teenager, I didn't notice this shit at all. But now, after having listened to linguistics YouTube for 6 years, I cannot not notice this stuff. And like, some of it is so small and petty that even I don't give a shit, right? Like, I don't care if some characters say the word goodbye because, that's an abbreviation of God be with ye. And like, that's another thing that doesn't have historical context in the world. But like, that kind of shit I'd let slide just because it's so unnoticeable. Like, we use goodbye in everyday conversation in the real world without thinking about its historical context. So like, it's fine. But then there are some words that are just like so obviously tied to a specific historical context that it's just like, how do you use this when you don't have the same historical context in your world? And also, as a linguistics nerd, I would prefer if the languages were constructed to be coherent languages and not to look pretty on the paper. But, I guess as an author who is a kid and doesn't know anything about language building, making your language look pretty on the paper is as good as you can do. And it's probably more than good enough for most readers, so like, can't really knock points on that, but yeah. Anyway, I'm a petty asshole and I notice things that nobody else notices, and then I get mad about them on the internet, and that's a thing that I do for fun, apparently. I sure as shit don't get paid for it. Anyway, thank you for watching. Go to my Patreon so that last sentence becomes a lie, and I'll see you in the next life. Laters. Hey, Endcard here. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Like, seriously though, please subscribe. I have like no subscribers. It's sad. If you want to find me on other social media stuff, you can do that at the Golden Stalfos on basically everything. Links to that are in the description, as well as to some charities I like but am obviously not affiliated with. I also have a Patreon if you like me so much that you want to give me money, though obviously only do that if you have money to burn, and if you do have money to burn, they're the charities I mentioned before. They probably need it more than I do. Mad ups to my girlfriend for doing all the editing for these videos. It's a really big help. Oh, and I occasionally stream on Twitch, so follow me there so you don't miss it. I don't have a formal schedule because when I tried to have a formal schedule, I couldn't keep to it, so oh well. Okay, thanks. Bye.